Hello, welcome back to the Breaking News Update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you are watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got a breaking news report coming out for the United States, and we're going to talk about U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in today's video. And I have a huge report today that apparently Scott Bessent was speaking to Congress and referred to Vladimir Putin as a war criminal. Take a look at your screen here. U.S. Treasury Secretary calls Vladimir Putin a war criminal to Congress. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Wednesday that while he considers Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal, he is willing to negotiate with him. U.S. policy on Russia may be changing. Okay, so ever since May 1st, when Ukraine and the U.S. signed this historic minerals deal, we've been seeing a change in tone coming out from the Trump administration. Trump, even himself, he made a major statement today. I'm going to show you guys that here in just a little bit. Also, J.D. Vance, the U.S. Vice President, are both making some statements that are coming out and opposing Russia and their decision to continue on this war and choosing to not end it, as Ukraine repeatedly has been calling on Russia to agree to a 30-day ceasefire so that way they can start negotiations and try to end this war. So I want to talk more about this today and show you guys what Scott Bessent said and what made him state this at while he was speaking to Congress today. Then I'll show you the statements coming out from Vice President Vance today and Trump. Okay, the rhetoric is definitely changing, and it makes you wonder if we're going to see massive sanctions being hammered down onto Russia here very soon, coming from the U.S. Let's hop on over here to the Kiev Post. Putin's a war criminal. Trump's Treasury Secretary Bessent tells Congress. Secretary Scott Bessent criticized the Biden administration's weak sanctions on Russia, saying it only targeted lower-level oil companies with a price cap that failed. So if you look here, the date, May 7, 2025, here's a picture of Scott Bessent right here. And something I will note, basically ever since Scott Bessent got into his position as U.S. Treasury Secretary, he's always been against Russia from the very beginning. He's talked about putting major sanctions on Russia in the past. So it says right here, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Wednesday called Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal as lawmakers pressed him on the Trump administration's policy to push Ukraine into dialogue with the Russian leader. Bessent was specifically asked by Congressman Juan Vargas, a Democrat out of California, ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee Task Force on Monetary Policy, during the committee hearing whether he would negotiate with a war criminal. I think it's the nature of diplomacy when one must negotiate with both sides, Bessent replied. I believe that negotiation was needed with the Japanese after World War II. Okay, so got more information here, and it says, when asked directly if he considered Putin a war criminal, Bessent replied yes. During his testimony, Bessent also spoke about the Trump administration's policy on leveraging sanctions and choking off the financial lifelines of terrorists, criminals, and hackers from Mexico and Guatemala to China and Iran. When asked about Russia, Bessent highlighted the U.S. response to Moscow's fossil fuel revenue, which supports its war in Ukraine. He also went on to criticize the Biden administration's weak sanctions on Russia, noting that only targeted lower-level oil companies and put in place a price cap that failed. He highlighted the Trump administration's success in lowering oil prices and the impact of reduced Russian revenue on their war efforts. Okay, so you can see he's talking about numerous things, and you can see kind of some of the hints that Scott Bessent is putting out on what might be targeted if sanctions were to be placed either directly against Russia or maybe secondary tariffs on other nations that maybe, for example, buy oil from Russia. So he's even talking here about how under the Biden administration, they had very weak sanctions targeting lower-level oil companies, possibly indicating they're going to go after some of their major oil companies and force Russia to end this war, because if Russia cannot sell oil around the world, well, they don't have any revenue for their nation to continue fighting inside of Ukraine. So we can see the different things here and the warnings that Scott Bessent was putting out in front of Congress and warning that the U.S. may slam Russia with some sanctions here, and I think that's what's coming next if Russia chooses to not to end this war soon. So let's go ahead and hop on over to X now. I want to show you guys this report from Ostap Yarish. J.D. Vance said, right now the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much, okay? So that's what JD Vance stated today while he was speaking at the Munich Security Conference. And I want you guys to see this clip, okay? The fact that he's saying the Russians are asking for too much, that's also indicating that the United States is not okay with Russia asking for too many concessions that Ukraine needs to give into in order to end this war. We've heard many times that Russia states that Ukraine needs to pull away from the front line, let Russia take over the 4 other regions they're fighting for right now, and just numerous other things that are absolutely insane demands that Ukraine will not accept to. So go ahead and take a look at this, guys, about 1 minute long.
And I wouldn't say, I'm not yet that pessimistic on this. I wouldn't say that the Russians are uninterested in bringing this thing to a resolution. What I would say is right now, the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much, okay? Now, what the president has said is that he will walk away if he thinks he's not making progress. And I think that, about once every 4 or 5 weeks, you will hear some American official or sometimes multiple American officials say, this is a week where we need to make another step. And in particular, the step that we would like to make right now is we would like both the Russians and the Ukrainians to actually agree on some basic guidelines for sitting down and talking to one another. Obviously, the United States is happy to participate in those conversations, but it's very important for the Russians and the Ukrainians to start talking to one another. And I wouldn't say...
Okay, so just a quick clip right there. So you can see that Vance is stating that the Russians are coming out with some of their own concessions and requirements to end this war. They're asking for way too much. They need to step down off that stool and come down to a different level with Ukraine and actually agree to just some basic steps to try to negotiate from the very beginning. And obviously that's an issue that we've been having is Ukraine and Russia aren't even negotiating at all. All that's been really held throughout the last, 4 or 5 weeks now, is basically the U.S. communicating back and forth with Ukraine and Russia. But the U.S. wants Ukraine and Russia to negotiate directly in some talks, okay? So we can see there, just from J.D. Vance, someone indicating that the Russians are doing too much, they're asking for too much, and this is possibly going to require the U.S. to take some next steps here in the next few weeks and push Russia to negotiate with Ukraine. Now, finally, one last thing from Military News UA. Trump commented on Vance's statement that Russia is demanding too much in negotiations. Maybe he's right. We're getting to the point where some decisions have to be made. I'm not happy about it, okay? That's what Trump says, guys. 25 seconds. Take a look at this.
Russia was asking for too much to end the war. Given that, do you still have confidence that...
When did he say that?
Earlier this morning.
Well, it's possible that's right. He may know some things that, because I've been dealing with this and some other things, but we are getting to a point where some decisions are going to have to be made. I'm not happy about it. Okay.
Russia was asking...
Okay, so there you go. We are getting to the point where some decisions are going to have to be made, and I'm not very happy about it, okay? So I think what he's talking about for the most part is Russia. Now, he does not exactly state, whether this is Ukraine or Russia, but we know from the very beginning now that Ukraine has been agreeing to a 30-day ceasefire with Russia, an unconditional ceasefire, I might add, for well over a month now, and Russia has refused to agree to that from the very beginning. So all of us are aware now that it is Russia that needs to take the next step and start negotiating with Ukraine and agree to a 30-day ceasefire, but we are hearing repeatedly that the Russians are not open to that because they believe it'll allow Ukraine just to regroup, or whatever the reason might be. So just wanted to share some of this information with you guys, let you know what the White House is stating today, and the change in tone and rhetoric is a complete 180 of what we would have just seen just about a month ago, okay? So it definitely looks like the U.S. is standing more on Ukraine's side. They're more siding with them at the moment, and if anything, the pressure that we're going to see coming from the United States is going to be on Russia here very soon, probably in the next few weeks, maybe sooner. But you guys let me know what you think is going to happen next. Share your thoughts, concerns, and opinions down in the comment section. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.